We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Miss Monica Lewinsky is back in the news, and no, before you ask, not for what made her famous in the first place, but now for being, I assume, a self-described activist and writer. And what's more, she has a civics lesson for us poor schlubs here in the real world who think that there are quite enough amendments to the US Constitution already. Now, we're joined once again by Mr. Scott D. Cosenza to find out what she's asking for and why, at least in my opinion, it would entirely gut the present system of governments that we have already if her wishes were adhered to. Scott, please tell me, is Miss Lewinsky a legal mind and scholar of such nuance and insight that we should listen to what she's saying here?
To be clear, she's not, and I think this is an important part of the story, a self-described writer. She is, in fact, a writer, published in the pages of the once important and venerated Vanity Fair magazine.
Is that still going? I wasn't aware.
It's not some tweet that, or she's not shouting down a manhole cover in some random street in America. This is the big establishment push to advance these ideas, at least in some part.
Okay, so these ideas, I mean, I think this is, I read it and I was kind of blown away by what she was suggesting. And I know that you find
Has she previously been considered somebody to rely on for guidance in establishing constitutions?
Well,
and
she has name recognition, which is important, which is why people like Monica Lewinsky are well listened to, and Chuck Schumer for his own reasons, I assume. So she was asking for 6 new amendments. Which ones leapt out at you, Scott? The thrust of her article was that
the biggest
there should be
one, Mark.
6 new amendments to the United States Constitution.
Yeah.
Which ones?
She's championing them. She's devoting herself to them.
And let's be clear, sorry, before we do go into this, she's championing them, but Vanity Fair is publishing her championing them, which means that there is almost certainly some kind of active media movement behind the ideas which they are allowing her to publish in their pages. So let's make that clear. This is not just one individual of fleeting fame for Oval Office activities decades ago. This is an idea.
We presume that this is messaging.
Yes, this is messaging.
That the purpose of this is to deliver this messaging rather than just enjoy the musings of a person who was once famous in a political context for an apolitical act.
That's a really nice way of putting it, Scott. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm hoping not to do too much editing on this segment, so let's keep it that way. Right.
So let's return to the printed piece, which I think will help steer us clear of trouble there. And the first one was that just truly leapt off the page. That's what generated my saying, like, you've got to be kidding me, which is this idea that persons who are approved for running for president have to be pass some background check first. Now, she doesn't say who will be the person approving or disproving of that, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to wildly speculate now, Mark, that perhaps the Biden administration would say that Mr. Trump, for instance, I was just going to pick a name out of a hat, did
just
not
at random,
the requisite background check to be named to the ballot, to be chosen by Americans as president of the United States. And that, maybe they could write in his name. I don't know if that would be allowed under her new amendment. But in any case, the powers that be would be able to say this person's approved for ballot access and this person's not based on a background check.
Isn't that wonderful? Because you've got so many factors of present government that would need to be involved. First, it'd be deciding what factors would be involved in the background check. Yeah. Second, they'd have to obviously it would have to pass which agency would be doing such a background check, because let's be fair, agencies aren't always great at digging into backgrounds, as we found out with the Justice Brett Kavanaugh going through his confirmation hearing, his nomination hearing.
Mark, you know what sometimes agencies do as well? Sometimes they don't produce their requisite product in a timely fashion. So perhaps the background check, due to unavoidable delays, could not have been processed within the requisite time to get the ballots printed. And whoopsie.
And lo and behold, Joe Biden, aged 86, has to run for a third term. It's not his fault. It's just because of the system in place, and he's just, poor Joe,
Indeed.
86 years old. He, running for his, or 90 years old, or 94 years old, running for his 27th term. It's not his fault. He doesn't want to do this to the Constitution. Right. So that was one that
I'm told that his experience is to our great benefit and not and doesn't accrue to infirmity or lack of cognition.
I thought this was No Country for Old Men
to the American people.
Unless they're Democrats, of course. Okay, so that was one. That was a huge one. I thought that was...
As an aging white man, Mark, I'm delighted to see the big box media turn from hating that demographic to embracing it as wizened leaders.
Well, Scott, it only works if you're socialist.
Well,
which
any port in a storm, Mark.
Any port in the storm, right? Yeah, well, I'll be looking into this socialism malarkey in about 40 years when I'm in that region myself.
The key thing for socialism is that the leaders don't have to suffer the indignities of the
well, of course. Of course. I mean, it's the hallmark of socialism. Now, so that was one big point on there that I also felt was probably the biggest one. But what else struck your attention?
Mark, the second thing that was the age restriction that she wants to impose. So it's sort of like, okay, to me, the messaging is, okay, here are the things to exclude Trump, and then also we'll do these other things to exclude Biden. And that's the messaging, is that we don't want Biden, but also we don't want Trump. And I just thought it was hilarious because it's like, what other choices can she remove from the American people? Clearly, what she's frustrated with is the American people are choosing people that she doesn't like for their leaders. And so she wants to narrow the choices to within the acceptable bands to get to a pick that she approves of.
Yeah, to get to Gavin Newsom is what she's saying here. It's to get to Gavin Newsom.
You're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud, Mark. Come on.
I know. I mean, for me, there was it was number 5 on her list, which was, and I'm quoting here, "Bye-bye, Electoral College." Now, there's a whole episode of Liberty Nation Radio to be done on the sins and the virtues of the Electoral College. But the idea that, you just remove the voices from all of these other co-equal states in favor of mega cities on the east and west coast. I mean, it's really just the most un-American thing I can think of.
Well, I don't know that I agree that it's un-American. Just because the Electoral College is part of our Constitution, I don't think that most Americans feel like that's part of being an American. I think they feel like it's having an equal representation is our governance.
Having an equal representation is.
Well, the point that they would make is that it's unequal representation, meaning the way that states that are small, and that's actually the way our founders designed it, is that a small state like Rhode Island or Vermont has 2 senators, for instance, and yet a big state like California, also 2 senators. Now, if we were reopening the books and writing anew, I don't think that the people of California would be as cool with that.
Scott, if I may interrupt, I have the solution to this. I have the solution to this whole problem. Is what you should do is you should have a second chamber of government, maybe call it the House of Representatives, and then give a representative based on the population of the state, because
we understand
that way everybody gets the representation that they want at the same time without just ending up with 2 megacities on either coast. What do you think of that idea? Do you think the founders would go for it? It's
a defensible position to say that the power that the Senate has should be more equally divided by the population and not by the states. We also used to have a feature in this country whereby the states themselves, the state governments, would send senators to the Congress. There was no direct election of the Senate. And so that actually was another more move towards direct democracy. And let me just add one thing, Mark, about this Electoral College thing is I think there's a factor here that people aren't, I think, featuring in, which is that so many people who live in dominant states where, for instance, in California, if you're a Republican, Mark, I think that a lot of people's expectations will be turned on their head if that comes to fruition, because there are plenty of Californians who stay home instead of going out and voting Republican, for instance.
A point well made. Scott and Mr. Lewinsky, thank you both for your insight. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
And that's about all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'd like to thank our guests, Mr. Tim Donner and Scott DeCasens, for joining us, and of course extend my thanks to you at home for taking the time to tune in and listen. I've been Mark Angelides. Thanks for listening, and we'll meet again next week. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.